Hi, I am Genevieve Griffin from Small Steps Go Places, and this is the Going to College 101 topic interview for leveling up, getting prepared for the fall. And today I am interviewing Donovan. Donovan is a rising senior in a high school in Kansas. Donovan, thank you very much for joining me.
Yep, thank you as well.
So, what do you think the most valuable thing you learned about yourself during the 11th grade was?
Well, it was definitely a lesson that I've learned over the past couple of years, but it really became obvious the last quarter of 11th grade when all of my stuff moved on onto, me getting most of my instructions through email and whatnot. And it's that I am 100% capable of knowing full well that I need to do something, knowing that it is important and urgent, and all the while, doing anything else besides it, up until the point where I'm doing whatever assignment it was for school, a week late. And I know this because it happened. I'm not even gonna try to guess how many times it happened. It was a lot. It was too much, honestly. And it was on some level aware that I do that a lot before this point, but it was when everything moved on to my email and Google Classroom, is I was getting information on all my classes in the same way regardless of whether it was a new assignment or a teacher reaching out to me because I hadn't finished one that was already assigned, it was the same. Whereas especially in my normal classes, if I wasn't aware of, an assignment I hadn't done, it was I would only become aware of it if the teacher pulled me aside, outside of class. So it was different in that I was much more aware of those things, which I have a continuous problem with. But I also definitely confirmed with me that I am very capable of pretending they don't exist when I am fully aware that they do.
Okay, so let me play this back a little bit. So before all of this COVID stuff happened, this might happen, but a teacher would just pull you aside and point it out. But you might be busy doing other stuff.
Yep.
So it's kind of back in the background.
Yeah, it was always a secondary thought to whatever I was trying to do at that moment. And there was always that separation between current and overdue stuff. So I could always ignore one to think about the other. And then once I started getting all my information from the same place effectively, that separation kind of disappeared.
Wow. This is, and so now I get this, it's you and your screen, basically. This is education. This is education for Donovan and millions of other people right now. I never thought about this as much as from a teacher or a counselor point of view. It's all about how are we going to engage these people? Because if they don't want to listen to what we're doing, they just go away, turn the computer off, or don't turn the computer on, or whatever. But this is a very interesting perspective. And in high school, we talked about this before, there's a lot going on. And so any one thing can get buried very easily, especially during your 11th grade. So now, wow, this is really interesting. So are you glad that you're more aware?
I'm glad. I'm definitely disappointed because my performance this year was very much lackluster. But it did lead me to some other discoveries, particularly in that, if you have a teacher that is having a hard time getting the class to participate in doing things, if you take that extra mile to not only do what they're assigning, but also have some level of dialogue with them, you will endear yourself to them that much more. And because I remember in my history class, the teacher never said outright that most of the class wasn't really doing the things he was assigning. But it kind of came across in some of his class updates and whatnot in Google Classroom. And I remember there was a particular assignment where we had to make some kind of video or skit thing off of some major event from the 1950s or 60s. And I decided I was going to do mine on the Apollo moon landings. And I did the entire assignment 2 weeks after it was due, but I pretty much got full points on it because when I first reached out to the teacher, I completely owned up to the fact that it was entirely my fault. I had put it off. But I left that channel of communication open, and I finished I finished a 2.5 minute video that I wrote, did lines for, and animated entirely by myself in the span of about a weekend. And I didn't get it in quite as quickly as I wanted to, because I kept running into technical difficulties. And I turned it in 2 days later than I said I would in the initial email. But I think he gave me full points of it, aside from stuff I would have missed in the assignment itself, because every single time I ran into a technical difficulty, I was completely transparent about this is, I can have it. It's going to take me an extra day because I have to figure out, how to get around this. I'll keep you posted as it updates, and then I send another one once I figured it out. And so I definitely learned that. Teachers very much appreciate when they're having difficulties with an entire class. That one student who goes out of their way to try to, try to, I guess almost treat them as another human being, because sometimes I feel like students treat teachers like they're robots that just get shut off at the end of the school day. Mm-hmm. And I found that was a very good way of that was a very good way of I guess almost giving them more faith in what they're trying to do.
You might be surprised if you ask teachers on a human being level how they'd really like to teach. A lot of them might say, you've just described it, where someone's grappling with something and going back and forth and letting them in on how you're trying to figure things out. The school system really based a lot of stuff on this mentality of groups and tests and things like that. So that's a real silver lining to this huge thing that has happened to all of us. So I'm glad that you and your teacher both have had that experience. So what are your 3 largest concerns or questions about the 12th grade?
Well, the first one, the big one I want to get out of the way because it's situational and it may not be generally applicable, and that's and I feel like a lot of people are in a similar position where we don't really know what's going to happen next year because of the whole COVID thing. It's already proven itself to be rather unpredictable. So I'm just not really sure, A, where we're going to be with that by the time August rolls around, and B, how the states, counties, and especially school districts are going to respond to that. And I guess by extension, the families and students themselves, since I know the attitudes on, safety measures and whatnot can vary widely. My next concern is kind of personal for me, because I feel like I'm just now starting to figure out what my kind of long running ongoing problems are with getting schoolwork done and keeping my grades up and all that stuff. I feel like I'm just now starting to figure that out, and the window for me to fix that before I go off to college is quickly shortening. And so I'm a little stressed that I'm not sure I know how to fix those problems in a timely manner. And then the third one is kind of just, I'm concerned about, the preparation I've been given by the school for college and whatnot. And part of me understands that there's probably some level of it that I can't be prepared for, and that's just an experience I have to go through. But I'm the kind of person who, when given a task to do, if I'm not 100% sure that I can do the task properly, I will ask incessant question after incessant question, to the point of driving the instructor angry, just to make sure I absolutely know what I'm supposed to be doing. And so situations where, the best course of action or even the rules on things are kind of unclear, sort of scare me on some level. And I'm just at a point where I don't really have a good idea for how I should be conducting myself with those things.
Well, so when I think of your three things, the first one is the question for all of us: what is this going to look like? And it's not necessarily going to look like the same in each state, because things have not,
or even each city.
But your third answers your second, so you have a short period of time. But because you ask incessant questions, you're going to figure out what sort of support you need. Yeah. And maybe you got that in your high school, or maybe not, but that certainly is a question to ask then when you're checking out colleges. If there are certain things that that you do or you don't do, or you need help with, that becomes one of your non-negotiables when you're looking at colleges.
Yeah.
Wow. Very, very. So when we were talking in preparation for this this interview, that you used a short phrase, existential dread, right?
Yep.
And I'm so surprised that was not part of one of your three.
It definitely influenced. It's like that uncertainty.
Yes.
To use an analogy that is really only directly applicable to the area of the country I've been living in, it kind of feels like when it's like an evening in tornado season, and you're supposed to be getting storms, and you just see that ominous dark green shelf cloud approach from the western horizon, and it's just yeah, that's a bit of a yikes.
Because you know what has happened in the past, and you've experienced it, and you don't know if that's what's going to happen now. I think that part of growing up, part of becoming a young adult is learning how to be uncomfortable. Comfortable with discomfort.
Yeah.
Because high school is a curated experience for a lot of people. So you do this happens. You don't do this happens. For the most part, And then when you go to college, it's kind of an open field. So that it will be exciting to see how you move forward toward that. Exciting is not always comfortable, but
yeah,
it can lead to a lot of things that you find yourself caring about later. How will you make sure that you have enough physical energy and motivation as you enter the 12th grade?
Okay, this is one I've been trying to figure out the answer for all morning. And that's because part of me is honestly suspicious at this point that the only reason I've gotten this far through high school is just sheer inertia. I don't know. It's just I don't really think about like having like the enough energy to get through like the school year, because I've always thought of it as like, it doesn't matter if I think I have enough energy, it's happening anyway. And yeah, there are definitely times where my alarm goes off at 6:45 in the morning and I'm just like, and then all through the day, my attitude remains unchanged. But then like, I don't know, for me, it's almost, I know this past school year, the fourth quarter was definitely the hardest. And I think part of what that was is the thing that does the most to getting me through any given school day after day, is like the interactions I have with friends, like before the classes start or during lunch or after school or whatever. Because I'm very much like a big picture thinker, which means that things like this that are, like very intimidating can very quickly sap my willpower or motivation. And so when I have these little interactions with friends and whatnot that don't really last much beyond like the 5 minutes or less of the conversation lasts, it kind of pulls me out of that mentality of thinking about the school year as a whole, or where I'm going after this. I will say in the last few months, my mentality on the school year has shifted from it being too long to not long enough. But I don't know. I definitely would have a much clearer answer on this if the last part of this school year wasn't so strange, because that definitely threw me off in more ways than one.
The reason I asked this question too is I'm so used to high school students already starting that college grind where sleep and eating just turns into coffee and binge sleeping, which I think is just something that happens in college. Where when you're in high school and you're at home with your family, I think people who are adults will say, oh, you should go to bed earlier. Oh, you should you're supposed to get 10 hours of sleep. Well, that's not happening, and so people have this box that they're thinking about. And then when you go to college and you're in charge of how your life is being led, you sleep when you can sleep.
Yeah.
But you're not talking about that. You're talking about the motivation part, the continuing. And I think that's been a really hard thing during this pandemic.
Yeah.
Because at the very beginning, everybody put in 1,000%. That's when everybody made videos and took pictures and did all this stuff, and then they ran out of juice. because this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine what it feels like for people in high school, because I know much more about counselors and teachers at perspective wise.
Yeah.
Now.
I do have to say that probably the hardest part of it was my sleep schedule. Now, I need to know is I'm someone I cannot stay up very late, nor can I sleep in very late. By midnight's like almost always my bedtime, regardless of what day of the week it is. Like I don't stay up past that, because past that point, my brain starts shutting down and I become useless. And then if I wake up past 10 o'clock in the morning, it just knocks me out for the entire day. I just can't get anything done. And so in a normal situation with school, my routine is every school night, I'm in bed at 11, up at 6:45. Every weekend night, I'm in bed at midnight, up at like anywhere from 7 to 8:30. What happened, like almost immediately after the pandemic hit, and my there became no distinction between the weekends and weekdays, was my sleep schedule shifted from those two distinct areas for me, even though it's only like an hour's difference in either of them, to going to bed at midnight and waking up at 7. So all in all, I started getting to a point where I'd lose an hour of sleep every single night. And, it's like, I have a very hard time making that up without like eating an entire day because I woke up after 9:30. Because what happens is people are like, oh, just go to bed earlier. I have literally tried that. I went to bed at 10 one time and I was up at 5:30. So like, great. You told I went to bed 2 hours earlier, and all in all, I lost an extra half an hour of sleep. And it's just like, so my biggest struggle this quarter has been keeping my sleep schedule in like its rigidity, because that was the only way I was going to survive it. And ironically, I only managed to get it back on track after the school year ended.
That is ironic, because you would think that you would need the rigidity during the school. So some people during this, though, they just devolved into pajamas, and into just, it's too much. I'm just not dealing with this. And a lot of people just, got up, put on their whatever clothes, school clothes, business clothes. There's a Catholic school that I work with. They required their girls to wear uniforms and to meet at the same class times. Other schools were happy if people showed up. It's interesting. But the schedule, the rigidity during a time of a lot of questions is very valuable. And I don't know why you lost sleep. I don't know why your body did that. That's interesting.
Well, at the very least, me having full control over my daily schedule allowed me to alleviate a little bit, because like what would happen is, I would more often than not only be getting work done in the afternoons. If not, I would start like no earlier than 10. And what would happen is I'd get up somewhere between like 7 and 8:30, kind of that. And since I got 7.5 hours of sleep, it would take me a while to get going. And then by 10, I would have maybe had like a cup of coffee, breakfast, maybe a second cup of coffee, depending on how I felt. And more often than not, like my like normal take a shower and put on something other than pajamas would be like 11 to 1 in the afternoon. And then I would sit down to get like work done. And that worked great for me because I found that the more sleep I lost, the longer it would take me to get going in the morning. And so I had like what felt like all the time in the world to like kind of get the gears turning on any given day.
So this is an important piece of information for when you look at colleges, because depending on what classes you need to take, you can set things up to give yourself the amount of time that you need to get in and do work at your optimal time. I know freshmen will sign up for college classes and they'll sign up for an 8:00 a.m. class because they're used to going to high school at 8. And boy, that doesn't work. So they lose a lot in that first semester of college because they don't show up for half the classes because other things are going on. And then they're like, oh, you can take classes starting at 11.
Yeah.
So going in knowing that and knowing more about yourself, that's a good thing. So on that note, now you are going to go in the 12th grade. So think back to the 10th or the 11th grade. And if you were standing in front of the class of 10th or 11th graders, or even if you were at a small table with a few, knowing what you know now, what would you tell them?
My first point of advice, and maybe only point of advice because I am not someone you should be taking advice from, is I don't care how stupid you think it is. Write every assignment you are given down, always, period, no exceptions. And I'm saying this as someone who has had numerous fights with both of my parents about this, particularly my mom, like all the way through high school, especially freshman and sophomore year. And what I finally figured out, the reason why you do it is, I mean, obviously, if you don't care about the assignments themselves, then it doesn't matter because you're probably not going to do them anyway. But what I found is that you get so much stuff on, put on your shoulders every single day, day after day, from multiple different classes. You definitely cannot keep track of that mentally. And as a result, if you write everything down, even if you don't have time to do all of it, or some of it you decide isn't important, that act of writing it down, I found, keeps you on conscious of it on a level that makes it much easier to effectively plan out your time and what you need to work on and whatnot. Even if you don't end up getting everything done, it just helps that little bit because it keeps you aware of all of the things that you've been given. And it took me two and a half plus years to learn this. Longer if you count me refusing to write things down all the way from the start of middle school. So that's my biggest piece of advice that I've learned as of recently.
Now, I have a question because I did an entire interview on planning. So that was a couple of months ago.
Okay.
And your piece of advice was what these two people talked about. Is this different, do you think, between young men and young women?
I don't think I have enough perspective on that to say conclusively, but I wouldn't rule it out.
Because this interview was with two young women, someone who was just finishing her freshman year and someone who's just finishing her junior year in college. And they talked about the transition from middle school to high school and how they both used some form of planner, and the planner was almost a metaphor for that transition. And then how they used the planner in high school, and then how they transitioned from high school to college with the same idea. It's very, very interesting. So they were very, very, very planner oriented. So one of the other interviews was with another college student, but who is a guy, does not use a paper planner, does notes on his phone. More of a checkoff and reorganizing things on the phone. But all of you talk about the importance, because I know one of the young women talked about how writing things down allowed her to organize. So once they're done, then she could move things around. That was a good piece of advice that your mom or both of your parents gave you, though.
Yeah.
And that's a huge piece of advice that you're giving those who are coming after you.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could make the argument that me not being, particularly on top of it ever kind of invalidates my authority to speak on that particular subject, but
sometimes people see you being a mentor when you don't even realize that is happening.
Feel bad for those people then.
Well, you can feel bad for those people, but they may not feel bad for what you're actually giving to them. Sometimes it takes a little life under your belt to realize everything. So that is my list of questions about leveling up and getting prepared for the fall. Do you have any final comments?
Not really. I think had I known I was supposed to come up with final comments, I might have thought of a couple, but
no, you didn't have to. It's just...
I don't think I have any all-encompassing general thoughts about the questions I was asked. So no, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, it sounds, Donovan, like you are prepared for the fall in a lot of very important ways, even though the fall is a bunch of question marks right now, because you're aware of things.
A bunch of question marks with exclamation marks slowly being added on as the summer progresses.
That is very, very true. Well, thank you very much for helping me by doing the interview for Leveling Up, and take care and good luck with your senior year.
Yep, I'll probably need it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.